homies, what's up? You know, it's Wednesday, so it's time for Influential Women. Today we'll be talking about German Chancellor Angela Merkel. In 1989, Angela Merkel was a quantum chemist with a respectable reputation for applying statistical mathematics to chemical analysis. In 1991, she was a minister in the government of a newly united Germany. 14 years later, she became the first woman chancellor of that nation, a post she held through financial and refugee crises that would have toppled lesser politicians, and continues to hold today as she steers her country through the hills and valleys of COVID-19 on the basis of the radical notion that scientists should be listened to and heeded in matters pertaining to science. What? That's crazy. We're gonna actually listen to scientists? What? It's like, oh my god, you're going to wanna give these people who study one or two very specific things throughout their whole careers an actual forum to have a voice? Wow. That's crazy. But might work. Let's see how this goes. Merkel's political ascension was unprecedented in a system that favored experienced veterans and a party infamous for its doughy maleness, and could perhaps have only happened in the context of such an unprecedented event as the collapse of communism and the need to reinvent governance as two nations separated by a half century of individual development and deep chasms of culture and ideology attempted to fill a new way forward together. She was not flashy or charismatic by the standards of the time, but she was deeply competent and reliable, clearly brilliant, and in all things cautious and accurate. She was, in other words, a scientist. A scientist whose life up to 1989 was based on routine and careful, meticulous, thought out, planned calculation. The daughter of a Lutheran pastor who had voluntarily moved to East Germany in order to train pastors there, Angela Kastner was from an early age under official suspicion that could only be overcome by conspicuous achievement. She joined the Pioneers and the FDJ, both communist youth groups, to maintain appearances and to participate in the wide spectrum of social activities those groups organized. Her grades in mathematics were exemplary, and her mastery of Russian language, as demonstrated in the Russian Language Olympics, won her a state-sponsored trip to Moscow. Gifted with a rigorous mathematical mind in a state that least theoretical honored scientific achievement, a career in the sciences seemed an easy choice for somebody of an ideological, questionable background who wanted to avoid the cold attention of the Stasi. But all scientists were not equally safe in the communist world. The life sciences in particular, as we saw in the case of Anna Beck, were habitually prone to political meddling that declared some theories patriotic and others dangerously anti-patriotic. Where even if you espouse the right theory today, a wind of change in the administration might land you in the gulag tomorrow. Physics, however, with its rigid mathematical backbone, seemed safer from official tampering, and so it was to physics that Kastner and a number of promising young Eastern minds who wished nothing more than to be left alone gravitated. In 1973, she began attending the Karl Marx University in Leipzig, formerly Leipzig University, an institution that was founded in 1409, and whose alumni includes such titans as German culture as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Wilhelm Leibniz, Friedrich Nietzsche, and other names I really can't produce and pronounce and don't really want to butcher. Kasner, the daughter of a pastor whose belief system was officially reviled by the reigning ideology, had a virtue of her studies earned herself a spot at perhaps the most prestigious university behind the Iron Curtain. After graduating in 1978, she moved to the Central Institute for Physical Chemistry at Berlin's Academy of Sciences, which was the successor to a scientific society founded by Wilhelm Leibniz in 1700. She had originally wanted an engineering position, but that job came with an expectation that she would work as an informant for the Stasi, and she artfully extricated herself from the situation by claiming she was terrible at keeping secrets, and therefore wouldn't be any good as an informant. So Kasner, who became Angela Merkel upon marrying fellow scientist Ulrich Merkel in 1977, turned to Berlin, where she would remain until her sudden rise in politics in the 1990s. Her specialty was quantum chemistry, where she employed her mathematical skills in performing the complicated computations necessary to describe basic chemical reactions from a quantum perspective. When it comes to atoms, just sitting innocently by themselves, computing the wave equations that predict the three-dimensional shapes where the electrons of different energies are likely to be found is actually the first test of an up-and-coming undergraduate chemist's mathematical chops. When you start bringing in other atoms, calculating molecular wave equation adds another layer of complexity. And when you start trying to calculate aspects of chemical reactions over time for those molecules, as Merkel did in her 1986 thesis titled Examination of the Mechanism of Decays with Singular Bond Breaking and Calculation Coefficient of Reaction Rate on the Basis of Quantum Mechanical Statistical Methods. That's kind of a long title. Let's do that one more time. In her 1986 thesis titled Examination of the Mechanism of Decays with Singular Bond Breaking and Calculation of their Coefficient Reaction Rate on the Basis of Quantum Mechanical and Statistical Methods. Yeah, that title was so nice, I wanted to say it twice. You are now in a new world entirely from where you began with simple standalone atoms and trying to predict where exactly their electrons will be. Merkel put out solid work during her decade of strictly scientific investigation, including a paper on vibrational properties of surface hydroxyls, published in 1988 in the journal Chemical Physics. And yet, in spite of its prestigious founder, the Academy of Sciences was a shadow of what it ought to have been. Underfunded and isolated, she and her husband drifted slowly apart and separated in 1981. And Merkel divided her time between her work and the sheer routines which formed the backbone of her existence, including long lone bike rides, watching football matches, and enjoying a beer and sauna experience every Tuesday. Which actually, beer and sauna once a week? I think I'm about to pick something up here. I like that. She had gone as far as she could go in the limited scientific environment of the late communist world, and regarded without enthusiasm the prospect of this life extending indefinitely into the gray future. That was when the world changed forever, The Berlin Wall came down. The two Germanys united. She saw her status as a minor figure in the local Conservative Party become a deputy position in the new East German government, become a ministerial position in the government of a unified Germany within the space of 2 years. Her rise was a composition of several factors. Her ability to keep a cool head in changing times and to sift through omnipresent hyperbole in search of concrete realities was valued by everyone and everybody she came in contact with, which sent her name up the chain of command from her local political party to its much larger associate, the Eastern wing of the CDU, or Christian Democratic Union, and from there to the CDU Central Command and the figure Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who was eager to find an East German woman of talent who could join his cabinet and combat the CDU's all-male, all-the-time image. You most likely know the story from there, how Merkel expertly rode a bribery scandal into the CDU to emerge as one of its leading figures, while her superiors resigned in shame, how she built a reputation as somebody who acted only after gathering all relevant facts, but who, once set in motion, acted decisively to form effective compromises where she could and to tactfully isolate and remove political obstacles where she couldn't. In this fashion, she coordinated Europe's response to the perennial problem of the Greeks' financial crisis, opened Germany's doors to a flood of Syrian refugees that the rest of Europe was content to leave to their dismal fate, and contained the scope of Putin's ambition in Ukraine, rendering the would-be conqueror a somewhat pathetic figure strutting as well as he could on the worthless hill that represented the least fraction of his ambitions, watching impotently as his every move was countered by his German nemesis. Into a political culture that vaulted the strut and screech of a peacocking strongman, Merkel infused a new approach based on hard data, a consideration of all relevant variables, and a focus on compromise over domination when at all possible. She brought the virtues of a scientist to an arena unaccustomed to their employment, and ran Europe's most powerful nation for a decade and a half on the basis of those principles, which proved their worth most dramatically in Germany's response to the COVID outbreak. By actively seeking and listening to the advice of health experts and the scientific community, Merkel's Germany had a set of testing and tracing guidelines in place by January 16th, had banned mass gatherings by late February, and had enacted its contact ban by March 22nd, with the result that by April 15th, the number of new cases per day, which had hit a high of 6,000 in mid-March, was cut down to 2,000 per day and now stands at something around 500, with daily deaths numbering in the single digits. We might not agree with every domestic and foreign policy decision taken by Merkel. We might be uncomfortable with her willingness to abandon former allies in the name of political progress. But I think what we can and must appreciate is the example she has set for how political decisions are arrived and how they are implemented. Data and compromise over ideology and intimidation. These are what Merkel at her best represents. And by demonstrating how effective they can be, even in the face of overbearing strongmen and global disaster, she has proven their worth time and time again, and has shown us a political path forward to a more collaborative and interconnected future, away from the dark political past that always seeks to draw us back into isolation and isolationist oblivion. So we thank Angela Merkel for showing that the ideas and policies which govern scientific progress can be applied and used successfully in the political sphere. All right, homies. Y'all be safe. Y'all take care. Catch you on the next one.